The Florida Gators announced either, I think it was a day ago or the day beforehand, that they were going to honor Urban Meyer with a on-campus salute November 22nd when they hosted rival Tennessee Volunteers. And I have some thoughts about this, some good, some positive in regarding Urban Meyer's legacy at the University of Florida. But before I get into that, I want to at least explain how we got here. So obviously, Florida was coming off the great decade that they had under Steve Spurrier, where they won from 1990 to 2001, winning six SEC championships, a national championship, getting to see Danny Werfel become a Heisman Trophy winner, NFL talent at the yin yang, going out the yin yang, coming in and out of the program. And then obviously they had to go to Ron Zook. And while Ron Zook wasn't necessarily a bad coach, and when you look at his tenure and what he did at Florida, it wasn't quote unquote bad compared to what we've had with Billy Napier, Will Muschamp. It certainly wasn't up to the level that you saw with Steve Spurrier. That's why we say in college, as college football fans, you don't want to be the head coach who is following the legend. You want to be the head coach who followed the guy that followed the legend. And with Urban Meyer, this rang true because, Ron Zook never, had a losing record at Florida, unlike Will Muschamp or Dan Mullen or Billy Napier. But he never got Florida to the big dance, which was the SEC championship game and beyond that. Obviously, won his share of rivalry games, which is important, but not at the level that was needed for him to be the long-term head coach at Florida. Recruited well, but just didn't do enough on the field to cement himself as one of the best coaches in Gatorland. Excuse me. Then in comes Urban Meyer, and there was immediate improvement. First year, went 9-3, I believe, went 9-3 or 9-4. More games than Ron Zook ever won at Florida, because the most Ron Zook won at Florida was 8. So immediately you saw improvement. Got beat Tennessee, beat Georgia, beat Florida State. Keep that theme in mind that year. And, it was a very good season for Florida. Then the very next year, 13-1, SEC championship, national championship. The following year, Florida goes back to 9-4. They lose, obviously, two big games to LSU and Georgia. They do, however, blow out Florida State and Tennessee off the door hinges, and Tim Tebow wins the Heisman Trophy as the best player in college football that year. The following year, another SEC championship, another national title. So 2 of each in a 3-year span in 2006 and 2008. Mind you, this was also while Florida was winning back-to-back national championships in men's basketball under Billy Donovan. So Florida was at the epicenter of college football and college basketball during that 3-year period. It was a very magical run. And then the following year, Tim Tebow's final year as a college football player, they go 13-1 again. They don't win the SEC. And by not winning the SEC, they don't win the national championship. They do win a Sugar Bowl against in a blowout against Cincinnati. And they once again beat Tennessee, beat Georgia, blow out Florida State yet again. I don't think... and then the final year in 2010, that's when everything started to fall apart. They had a big upset loss to Mississippi State. They lose to Florida State for the first time under Urban Meyer. They still beat Georgia and Tennessee. So Urban Meyer only had one loss against Georgia, one loss against Florida State, and was undefeated against Tennessee during that time. And it was just it was a season where everything collapsed under Urban Meyer, and then also it became more apparent that he was leaving the program, by his words, due to health reasons, and also needing to get himself away from the Gator fan base, because the Gator fans we're one of the most intense fan bases in college athletics, and we're proud of that. With the being the only our team is the only one in the nation with 3 championships in both football and basketball. The only champion, the only program, the only school in the SEC with championships in football, men's basketball, and baseball, and in the only state as well with that. And we have a great track and field program. we're a fan base that, calls itself the everything school because we love seeing our team win. We love seeing our team perform at its best. And Urban Meyer said even when he was winning 13 games in one season, it was almost as if it wasn't enough for Florida fans, which it wasn't that it wasn't enough for us. We just wanted to see it. We wanted to see it again and again and again and again. And that's what winning does. When you start winning start winning a lot, you almost start to expect it to see it more and more and more because that's what you've been showing. When the wins go up, the expectations go up even higher. And Urban Meyer said that he had to get away from that, and then he also used a health reason to do it. But then, about a little bit over a year later, he was coaching at Ohio State, or announced that he was going to coach at Ohio State. That to me is where I start to, you know, my legacy of Urban Meyer gets a little bittersweet. And not only was it for that, but during his time at Florida, a lot of Florida players, especially on the 2008 team, had a lot of players getting arrested. As much as us Florida fans make fun of Georgia for how many players are getting arrested in their program, Florida was kind of the originator of that. It started with Florida, obviously the Aaron Hernandez becoming a murdering scumbag, and Tony Joyner becoming a murdering scumbag, and so many bad things and it was off the field issues that started to circulate and expand under Urban Meyer that also plagued Will Muschamp and Jill McElwain because that was a culture that was allowed and protected by Urban Meyer, and those two coaches had to deal with that for quite some time. It's died down in the years since during the Dan Mullen and Billy Napier eras, but Urban Meyer was the leading cause of that. And also, a lot of players said while he was a guy that a coach that won a lot, he was not. He was the a-hole coach that won. He was the asshole coach that demanded a lot from his players and was not going to take, you know, was not going to take anything less than satisfactory performance, whether it was on the practice field or on the football field. So for me, as a Florida Gator fan, while I appreciate and respect what he did in Gainesville, I can't ever hold him in the light that some Florida fans do because of those reasons. The players getting arrested, the way he left the program, the way and another big reason is that he quit. I believe that he quit coaching at Florida because he didn't want to have to compete against Nick Saban. In his final year at Florida, Florida went on the road to Alabama, which was a big primetime matchup, and got absolutely destroyed by Alabama in that game. And I think once he saw the juggernaut that was starting to build in Tuscaloosa, he said, I didn't want to coach against that on a year in a year basis. So he went to Ohio State, where he knew out of Ohio State he was going to remain the most talented, with the most resources to him available, and was going to have the most at his disposal in the Big Ten at Ohio State. He knew that he was no longer going to have that advantage at Florida with the way Alabama was building itself up, with the way LSU under Les Miles was starting to build itself up. And considering that the SEC was adding more teams into the conference a couple years later with Texas A&M and Missouri, they he saw that. I was like, you know what, I need to leave now while my legacy is still relatively intact, which was a shrewd move on his part. I have to give him credit. I can't lie. So that's kind of where my bittersweet memory of Urban Meyer uh, sets itself. Great coach, but I feel like he quit on the program, and I felt like his lasting legacy at Florida kind of should include that. We shouldn't just solely remember the games that he won. Like, that really needs to be included as well when you're talking about the story of Urban Meyer. And plus, he kind of proved himself to be not really a good person when he was the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. But that to me, that's a whole other video that's separated from Florida. That was over a decade after he was coaching at Florida. But I just kind of had to throw that in there. So I don't really hold Urban Meyer in as much lore as other UF fans does. I think he's a I think he's one of the greatest college football coaches of this century. I think he should be in the Hall of Fame. He demanded, and he should be in the Ring of Honor for both Ohio State and Florida. But that's where my compliments, end. So that's my legacy of Urban Meyer. You don't have to agree with me. You can tell me why you disagree in the comments. But while he deserves to be honored at Florida, there's always going to be that there's always going to be that yeah but feeling at the end of it. So that's congratulations to him. November 22nd, Florida hosts the Tennessee Vols, and that's where he's going to be honored. And those are just my thoughts on it.